Hello everyone, this is Dan coming to you with a tournament battle report series for an event that I went to just this past weekend, April 27th and 28th, just outside of Baltimore, Maryland, at Titan Games and Hobbies. It was hosted by the Titans at Ninth Club, James, aka Vamps in Maryland, on the forums, ran the event. Great guy. The event was smooth, everything went very well, I think. He had named it Duel of Titans because he was afraid of trademark infringement with the Clash of the Titans. Didn't want any trouble, so that's what we went with. So 5 games, 4,500 points apiece over 2 days, as I mentioned. 3 games the first day, 2 the second day. And there was a custom scenario for round 3 called Duel of Titans, which I'll go over in detail once I get to that game in particular. So you can see here, if you just want to take a glance at the scenarios over the 5 games. Again, I'll bring them up as we encounter them. And then what you see now is my list. So it's 4,500 points. There's a bug going on with New Recruit right now where the list will show the proper points when you're building the list, but when you submit it, not everything seems to have the correct total points. So you can see my list displays 4520 points. It's like 4498. It's because the point cost on the Imperial Guard doesn't update properly when you submit the list. So in any case, this is pretty typical for me. It's a lot of infantry. It's actually just over 300 models is what I was able to achieve. 90 flagellants, the big block of Great Weapon Imperial Guard, and minimal shooting. I actually got goaded into dropping pistols on the riders, which is what they initially had. So the only shooting in the list is the 3 units of 5 Imperial Rangers. So it's mostly going to be fighting in combat. And speaking of being goaded, my first opponent is Chris Wynn. Let me pull his list up right now. So Chris was on the fence regarding even coming to this event, and he had been posting lists in our Discord chat. And there was this one in particular that he posted that looked like so much fun to play against that I begged him to come to this event. And he then reached out and said, well, listen, I have a lot of combat infantry in my list. You have a lot of combat infantry in your list. This battle's got to happen. So we ended up grudging each other for round 1. And so my list, again, had 90 flagellants. He's got 90 Kingsguard. 2 giant blocks of 40 clan warriors with great weapons. He's got kind of like a bus of seekers to carry the 3 dragon seekers that he's got, all of which have 2 runes of fury and then something else, and then an anvil and a runic smith, and that's it. So this is going to be a bloody game. He's got no shooting. I've got no shooting. Minimal ways to deal with him outside of combat, so we're just going to be fist fighting for most of this game. So the first scenario and deployment is Frontline Clash, and it is Hold Target, which is not a custom scenario. It's actually an ETC variant, I think, of the Secure Target and Hold the Center or Hold Ground secondaries. So in this case, you drop 2 objectives like normal, but instead of capturing them at the end of the game, you start accruing points turns 2 on, depending on who is in control of the most of those objectives. So let's move on to deployment. And here we are. So my round 1 deployment looks like this. Now, I want to make a note too that this, I maybe mentioned this in the forums, that this army can't drop for first. So because I have no shooting, because everything is infantry and can't move around very quickly, I have to counter deploy against my opponent. So if they drop first, that's easy. However, if I get the opportunity to start putting units down, I usually just start going back and forth until my opponent drops. And 2 of my opponents must have realized what I was doing. Chris was one of them. And we ended up just going back and forth like it was 6th edition Warhammer for the entire deployment phase, and then dicing off. And he got a bonus because I had more units to drop. But yeah, that happened in my 5th game as well. So it's fun to just kind of drop units back and forth, old school style. So my deployment, as it sits, is the riders. You can see this is post Vanguards and Scouts. So Vanguarded riders over on the left. Remember, they have no pistols, just light lance and shield. So for the lulls, I guess. Big unit, or not big unit, support unit of halberdiers on the left of what are ruins there. Parent unit on the kind of back line there, you can see I have to double stack. And someone else had asked in the forums, like, how do you do deployment? Like, it seems like it's difficult with that many models. And the deployment is actually not difficult. It's movement gets tricky. You have to really pay attention in the movement phase. There's not a lot of, finagling things like there might be with solo models. It's just more about making sure you don't get in your own way. So I'll discuss that a little bit maybe on some later slides. But back to deployment, big unit of spears on the left there, the unit of 20 support infantry in between the spears and the Imperial Guard, which are in the center bottom of the screen, like 3 characters in the front right of that unit. And then 2 units of flagellants in front of them. 3 units of rangers had scattered out in front to try to chaff up that unit of seekers. I'd mentioned I really don't have much to deal with them at range, but they're going to try their best to chaff them up for at least a couple of turns. Another unit of spears on the right of what is actually an impassable. It's not ruins, though it does look like ruins. It's another small unit of support infantry on the right of them, and then on the bottom right, you'll see the electro cav with great weapons, and you'll see the 3rd unit of flagellants off on the far right-hand side there. So the 2 objective markers are right in the middle of the screen, essentially. They look white, but they're actually gold. And my opponent's deployment is fairly symmetrical. He's got Kingsguard on the left, warriors in that water terrain. He's got a rune of mining on his runesmith. That's why he doesn't care about that water. He had named the water as his feature to choose. Kingsguard in the center. Anvil kind of up behind those woods. I'd mentioned the Seekers with the 3 characters are in the woods. They'd vanguarded up. Another unit of warriors on the right, and then another unit of Kingsguard on the far right. So in terms of spells, I have Crown of the Wizard King, so that is mostly taken just to trigger the divination attribute and get the extra range on those spells, but sometimes the extra spell comes in handy. I got Raven's Wing in this game, and then for my 4 divination spells, I have Unerring Strike, so the 2d6 magic missile. I have Fate's Judgment to the d3 or d6 wounds missile. I guess it is a missile. Those both taken to try to do some damage to those Seekers if I can. And then I have Scrying for hard target distracting, and I have Stars Align for rerolls to hit, which I thought would couple very nicely with all these flagellants. So he has quite an investment in the magic phase. So he's got a Runic Smith, he's got a Anvil that I mentioned in the back there, and then all 3 units of Kingsguard have Rune of Wisdom, on which he took -1 to wound. So a total of 5 instances of -1 to wound. So on any given unit of Kingsguard in particular, he can try to ramrod it through 3 times. So that will be fun throughout the game. So I mentioned we went back and forth to deployment. He won the roll-off, but chose to go second. So here we go. Off into my turn 1, and I move up thusly. So everything moves up. Rider's way up on the far left-hand side. They're going to try to run around and go after that Anvil, because that's pretty much all they can do in this game. They have no shooting. So that's where they're going to start heading. Halberdiers on the left move up a little bit. I should make a note now, and this is my fault, that I misread the scenario when we started this game. I thought this was just regular old secure targets. So I really wasn't that worried about objective turn 1. And because I knew that I was going to have to deal with this list of my opponents in combat, of course, I thought, let me focus on these Seekers first. I'm going to keep my army back a little bit, try to blast them, chaff them up, and then once they're dealt with, I can try to tackle these blocks one at a time, right? So that was my thinking. Knowing that you start gaining points turn 2 on, I should have been much more aggressive here in this opening phase, since I had the initiative here. But that's why I don't move up as far as I could have and certainly should have. That's where things sit. So otherwise, other than the center kind of hanging back, everything on the flanks moves up as far as they can. Magic to me is a 6 to 5 in this first phase. And the one thing I get off is a boosted Fate's Judgment, which does 5 wounds to the Seekers, knocks out their back rank. So that's fun. And then we're already into my opponent's turn 1. All the Rangers shot at the Seekers, but they were at like 7s to hit. So not doing much damage there. I made another mistake here. This is, again, my fault. My opponent actually asked me, he said, can I charge all 3 characters out of this unit? And I think it's been like 6 months since I've played a game at 9th Age. And I said, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. So you can't do that. But what he ends up doing is charging all 3 Seekers at the 3 Ranger units that were chaffing him up. So 2 of them fled and got away. They're kind of down into the bottom and left. And then this unit that you see ran, I think, like 3 inches or something like that. So that Seeker, or that Dragon Seeker, catches them. That's just before that unit's removed. And then that's where his Seeker sits. He does condense the unit of 2 that are still in the woods there. This is before he had done that. So that Seeker's sitting out there in the open. And then he moves up his Warrior and Kingsguard bricks on both sides. Everything just marches up as far as they can. And then every turn he's actually moving that anvil 3 inches, just kind of shuffling it around, trying to keep it up with his line. But I don't always take pictures of that. So magic is a 9 to 6 phase for him. I mentioned he's got an anvil and a runic smith, so he's gaining at least 1 power dice every turn just from channels. So he's got a couple of big magic phases. And in this particular round, he gets off Rune of Revocation twice on both of those Dragon Seekers out in the open, hoping again to shut down my magic missiles from just blasting them off the table. And then we're already to my turn 2. He's got no shooting, no combat to speak of. So once magic's done, we're into my turn. So my turn 2, I charge in with the flagellants that were in front of that Imperial Guard. Because the one thing I don't want to have happen is those Dragon Seekers getting into that Imperial Guard brick. They'll die. Like, the Imperial Guard will kill them, but he could easily assassinate a character. They're only 1-up armor on the General and BSB. And then I think just a 2-up armor on the Wizard. Or they could blend. I think they have 8 attacks apiece, so they could blend some Imperial Guard pretty easily. So I'm trying to keep them away from the expensive Imperial Guard, throw some flagellants at them. Because actually, I was doing the math, each of these Dragon Seekers is like almost 400 points. So they're worth 1 unit of flagellants. So even if I have to sacrifice a unit of flagellants to kill 1, it's still, in terms of points, a fair trade. Though I had bigger aspirations for the flagellants, because my plan was to throw 1 unit of flagellants at each of his Kingsguard. Because while the Kingsguard win that fight, like, they'll come out having killed all the flagellants mathematically. The flagellants will do a huge amount of damage on the Kingsguard, and the Kingsguard are worth not double. They're like 670 points for Unity Kingsguard, whereas the flagellants are 395. So I'll take that trade all day long. So even if I have to sacrifice the flagellants to make the Kingsguard combat ineffective to the point where even like maybe one of these spear bricks could tackle them, that's a fair trade in my mind. So that was the plan. The Electrocav moving up to the far right there to try to threaten the flank of the Kingsguard. It's really not a good charge for them because, 10 attacks swinging back with Kingsguard is still going to put a serious hurt on the Electrocav, but it just gives me some options. And then move up on the left-hand side as well. Again, not as aggressively as I should have because I didn't have the proper objective in mind. I was waiting for him to kind of move forward, wait for these Seekers to get killed in the center, and then lunge at them. And we're into my magic phase turn 2. I get Scrying off, and I throw Guiding Light over here as well. I should mention I have the extra halberdier models that I brought along. I use as tokens for the various orders. So you'll see 3 of them. So one is a banner, one is kind of an at port position, like this one here, which is fight next to rank. The banner is the minimized discipline order. And then I have one that's in kind of a marching position, and that is the on the double order, so extra movement. So in this case, that unit has fight next to rank up. So I cast Scrying on this unit, so they're going to be -1 to hit, and then throw the attribute there as well. And then this, by the way, this spear block is the one on the right of that impassable, and is squaring off against this Dragon Seeker here. And this is another thing that I forgot to mention. He had forgotten to move up those Seekers that were in the woods until later in the phase. He said, do you mind if I move them? I said, yeah, of course. So anyway, that's why I didn't have a picture of it earlier, but they moved up to chaff these spears. That's why they're as close to that impassable as they are, because I charged them into those Seekers. And no shooting really for me, because 1 unit of Rangers is gone, the other 2 just rallied. And so this is the flagellant combat with the 1 Dragon Seeker off on his own. So that Dragon Seeker takes 2 wounds, does 5 wounds back to me, which is about correct. And they sit there because nobody cares. And then we're in already to my opponent's turn 2. So he had declared a charge over here on the right. It was makeable. It was like a 9 or something that he needed, 9 on dice, and he failed it. So they just moved forward a little bit. The Dragon Seeker that was on his own after killing the unit of Rangers charges into the support unit over here. And then he charges his other Dragon Seeker into the Flagellant combat that was already ongoing. He actually also tried that flank charge with the Kingsguard, which was also very makeable. I think also an 8 or a 9, but he failed that one too, which always sucks to see. I mean, it's great for me, but not very fun for my opponent, and it sucks to have 2 happen in one phase. And then we're into a 6-4 phase for him, and he gets off resistance over here. So -1 to wound, because I'm now going to countercharge him. So that's unfortunate, but I mentioned this maybe in a previous battle report that I've done, that dwarves can rely on getting 1 spell off per turn. Sometimes you get lucky and you get more than 1, but usually it's whatever dice you're up. So he was up 2 dice in that phase, so he's bound to get 1 spell off. It's just kind of how it always works. And then this is, again, we're already in his turn 2 combat phase. So one of the other Dragon Seeker died. This one takes 2 wounds, but you can see they blended up these Flagellants pretty decently. So still going to be a hopefully good trade in my favor there. And then the Seekers that had been charged by the Spearmen ultimately die. And then over here, the Dragon Seeker, 1 combat did 5 wounds. They actually were in range of the General. Like, the General has an 18-inch bubble, so they were within that 10-inch, and they still failed it. So what do you do? So they run. Dragon Seeker chases, but doesn't catch them. And then we're into my turn 3. So yeah, as broadcasted, I charge the Flagellants into the Kingsguard. I charge the Electrocav into the flank, hoping that if I win that, because they're going to just demolish each other. And yes, I'm going to take some wounds from the Electrocav, but I'm hoping I win combat by like 1, with the extra static res being brought in by a flank charge and potentially extra wounds there. And what I can do is then push the fleeing Kingsguard, because they're not stubborn, and only discipline 9, no BSB, so hoping for an errant break test here. And then I can push that big block of Flagellants or whatever's left of them into the flank of those warriors there, and then hold them down, or get, do some damage in the flank there. So we'll see what I can do. And then over here, I realized after my opponent got a point for the objective at the end of round 2, like, oh my god, I messed up on this objective. He's going to start getting points, and I have to now like shift him away from these objectives. So I charge with those Flagellants that are on the wall feature there in front of my line, but they fail, which is fitting since my opponent failed 2 charges in the last phase. But what it means, I'm going back to my comment in the deployment phase about how what's difficult is not deployment, it's movement, right? So this is a good example of what I'm talking about, that those Flagellants failed their charge, and now my entire line, the critically 3 scoring units, can't march up to even contest that objective. So my whole line just kind of sits where they're at. And then, yeah, over here on the right-hand side, I force through Stars Align. So again, I'm trying to just waste this unit of Kingsguard, do as much damage as possible, even though I know I'm going to take a ton of damage back. But he's not in line formation, so hopefully it's not going to be too bad. But I'll do more damage to him, I'll win combat, push him then to my left, and get into the flank of those warriors. So we'll see what I can do. And then, yeah, these Flagellants kill off, if there's only 1 wound left on that Dragon Seeker. So they've now killed 2 Dragon Seekers, 1 unit of Flagellants. So, like, yeah, almost 800 points of characters. So they've certainly done their job. They're facing the direction they're in. I know he's going to charge my flank with the Kingsguard, but I'm almost baiting him at this point, because I think I'll be in a position that I'll be able to charge him with the Imperial Guard and kill him. But if he fails to charge again, I can then flank charge on those warriors. So I'm just kind of leaving them where they're at. No big deal. Over here, yeah, I do some damage, but not as much as I'd hoped. So you can see he did quite a bit of damage to me as predicted. Yeah, I think something like 10 or 11 wounds. And then I do about that to him. He does do some damage to the Electrocav. I win. I win combat by a couple. I think like 2, but he passes his break test. So there we sit. And we're into his turn 3 now. So I think I took these pictures out of order. He did some charges on the left, but over here I think I was just showing you that he actually backs up with his warriors. He does not charge into that unit of spearmen. But yeah, here we are. So here are his charges. He does charge the Kingsguard into the flank of those flagellants, and he charges that big warrior brick into the remaining untouched unit of flagellants. Kingsguard over on the far left charge into those halberds. Those halberds are actually within 8 inches. The front rank is within 8 inches of that unit of spearmen, which for those who are not aware means that they, as long as they have one complete rank, can claim the spearman's rank bonus for the purpose of steadfast. So as long as he doesn't kill 16 of them, which I guess he could, but as long as he can kill 16, they'll be testing on a steadfast test. So could potentially hold up those Kingsguard, and then maybe, depending on how many flagellants die, could then flank charge him with those spears. So we'll see if that plays out. Magic for him, another big phase. He had 10-7. And he gets off Revocation as the spell that he forces through, which takes away Stars Align off the flagellants, which is unfortunate because they then lose their rerolls to hit, which is what I really needed to kill off that unit. Still, again, do a ton of damage. I think I lose combat this time. Again, we're right into his combat phase, no shooting. But there we sit. So down here, I failed to mention in the last turn, or my last player turn, that the support unit that had fled from the Dragon Seeker did rally, and then he charges them again, does a ton of damage, but they hold that time. And then the warrior combat here with the flagellants, we just beat up on each other. We're basically doing like 11 wounds to each other. And that's just kind of how it's going to go while we grind each other down. The halberdiers, I think, actually break from combat. You can see he does 15 wounds. So I'm testing on steadfast 10 non-rerollable. But I think they end up breaking, even though I don't have a picture of it. So we'll see, I guess, what direction the Kingsguard are facing there. Now to my turn 4, so I've now lost 2 scenario points, right? So I have got to do something about this objective. So what I do is charge the spears into the flank of the Kingsguard. It's a risky maneuver because obviously I'm giving him a flank. However, I'm thinking that even though I predict the flagellants will die, that I will win that combat with all the static res being brought in. I think I'll kill a couple of Kingsguard, and I can then break that unit, run him down with the flagellants, turn to face with the spears, and then I'm contesting this objective because I got rid of his scoring unit over there. So we'll see. I'm just trying to clean those points up. So, here's where we then sit. So you can see the halberdiers must have fled because they are now rallied. Yeah, we're going to say that they rallied. So this is now my turn. So they broke from combat. Halberdiers rallied. And this is where things sit over there. So the spears could not charge through that gap because there were just enough flagellants left to prevent the wheel. And then the Imperial Guard do charge into the Kingsguard. Riders finally make it into combat with the anvil up in the top there. And then into my magic phase, it's an 8-5 phase. So that works out well. Over here, I ended up double buffing the Imperial Guard. So, which is fortunate because he has Rune of Resistance up on the Kingsguard that they're engaged with. But I got off both Scrying and Stars Align. So the Imperial Guard are going to be fighting in multiple ranks, 4 ranks, and they're going to have rerolls to hit. You'll see sometimes so they're fighting extra rank right now is the order that they got. Sometimes I throw the banner there in lieu of the card for Stars Align, or for any divination spell getting minimized rolls because it means the same thing in my mind. But that's why sometimes you'll see both like that. No shooting, so right into combat. The support unit on the far right that had been duking it out with that Dragon Seeker flee, but this time he does not pursue because he wants to turn to face the spears that are engaging here. And unfortunately this combat does not go the way that I'd hoped. We only do, I think, 1 wound between all the flagellants, the spear attacks, and the flank, and he wipes out the flagellants. I end up losing that combat despite charging him in the flank with a ranked unit, and he turns to face me. Actually, it's my turn, so I reform first to face the warriors, give him my flank, and then he reforms to engage my flank, as you see. So yeah, that went pretty badly for me, which is unfortunate. But this combat here in the center, you can see we do another round of like 10, 11 wounds to each other. So pretty evenly matched, but he's going to win just because he's got numbers. And then this combat was brutal. Again, he's -1 to be wounded, and he is being fought in 4 ranks with great weapons, rerolls to hit. He's -1 to hit me, so he only does 4 wounds to me, and I basically wipe out the unit. And now, this is where a lack of a BSB is interesting, because he's testing on leadership 8, because he's max leadership 9. My BSB causes fear. And that was another thing. I think he also failed his fear test. So he was +1 to be hit and -1 to hit me. That's why he did so few wounds. So really, really horrible combination of spells and abilities hitting him all at once. So he ends up losing almost the entire unit. They break and run because he rolled a 9 on his discipline check. And then we end up here. So the Imperial Guard pursue and run that unit down. That was a very pricey unit because it had his Runic Smith in there. So killed the unit, got the Runic Smith, got the 200 victory points for the general. And you can see the Imperial Guard are now in a very good position to potentially flank charge those warriors up on the other side of those woods there. So we'll see what ends up happening there. Now into my opponent's turn. So he charges the flank of the remaining Flagellants with those Kingsguard to try to finish that unit off, and does end up charging those warriors into the spearmen that are engaged on the flank by the Kingsguard. You can see also that Dragon Seeker charge at the rear of that spearman unit. So that spearman unit's going to have a hell of a time into his magic phase. It's a 9 to 5. And yeah, he gets up both Rune of Resistance and Rune of Revocation. So Rune of Resistance on the Kingsguard, Rune of Revocation onto the warriors over here. And in combat, God, riders with light lances and shields are just useless. I mean, they charged in for this anvil. They took a wound in the last turn. I don't think I mentioned that. They did nothing to this anvil. And granted, the anvil is a tough war machine to go after, but yeah, they're just getting kicked around. So they take 2 more wounds and mercifully run away. So now I'll just hide them to try to preserve those points. But yeah, what a waste. And these spearmen get chopped up by all of those attacks in the flank, in the front, in the rear. Yeah, so they're just getting demolished and end up breaking and running. I think I don't have a picture of that, but that's not at all surprising. Flagellants get finished off by the Kingsguard and the warriors, who turn to face like this. And this is where he ends up over on the right-hand side with his pursuit roll. So yeah, the spearmen break. No, actually, well, this is partly showing that, but this is actually my next turn now. So I declare a charge with the Imperial Guard at those warriors, but he fled. So he's running away, and I'm going to try to redirect into that anvil, but ultimately I fail. So they end up in the woods. And yeah, I don't charge with either the spearmen or the support unit of heavy infantry there, because I don't care. I'd rather have the bonus AP from the spears, and yeah, he's winning me on 2s, whether it's strength 5 or strength 6, 7, doesn't really matter. So no shooting into my magic phase. It's going to be a 7 to 5 phase, and I buff up this unit. I'm trying to prevent him from charging my flank because it's enticing for him. He won't kill the unit, but he'll do a decent amount of damage. Might assassinate my wizard. So I'm just throwing up scrying on this unit, and yeah, hoping that he does not charge me. And we're now into his turn. So he's charging the front of the spears, and I support charge with the halberds on the flank. Counter charge with the halberds on the flank there, just to bring in some combat res. I know they're going to die in response, but I don't know. I'm just trying to do damage at this point to the Kingsguard, not really trying to outsmart them. And then the warriors charge into the support unit of heavy infantry there. He does not charge my flank. I don't think I have a picture of that, but he ends up just moving things around. Magic is a 7 to 5 to him. And this was just stupid play on my part. So if I go back a couple of slides here, you can see he's been running with that anvil. And he had fled with the warriors in my turn. He rallied and Yeah, I don't know what I was thinking here. I was trying to prevent Rune of Resistance going off on this Kingsguard because, again, my mentality at this point is I just have to do damage. Even though I'm going to take damage in response, let me just try to pick up some points, right? So I stopped Rune of Resistance from going off, and he had, 2 instances that he could throw over on this Kingsguard. But what I forgot that he had was Rune of Resolve on the Anvil, which allows it to do a magical, I think, 12-inch fly now. So you can see my plan at this point was that I need to do a long bomb charge on that Anvil. I think this is turn 4 if I'm counting correctly. And then I would then overrun potentially into that big warrior block and clean up those points. I'll get, knocked around in response, but I think I can do it without having my unit become decimated, and I think I can break that unit. So that was the hope. But what I forgot was that he had Rune of Resolve, so he ends up jumping the Anvil out of the way. So now I don't have a target to charge in my next turn. So that was bad play on my part. Yeah, the warriors chop up those heavy infantry, but they hold. And in fact, I forgot that too, that he had charged around the Imperial Guard. So you see he did not charge the flank with the Kingsguard, but that Dragon Seeker was just to the left of them. And they charge, you can see here, they charge into the flank of those heavy infantry. So he beat them up real good, but due to the same thing with the Halberdiers, that unit is steadfast right now because they're within 8 inches of that Spearman parent unit, so they get to claim their ranks for steadfast. So steadfast rerollable 10. So that unit sticks, and then the hammers beat up the spearmen, but they take a couple of wounds in response. And the halberdiers die on the flank as well. My movement phase, there's really not much to move, so we're now into my turn 5. No, this might be my turn 6. Because I think all I can do at this point is turn to face. Magic is a 5-4. I get off Stars Align on the Spearman unit here. And just throw Guiding Light on the same target again. Just trying to do damage to this unit of Kingsguard. No shooting, so right into the combat phase, you can see we beat each other up some more. And I'm still steadfast, so I hold the support unit on the right, ends up breaking. He pushes to the left and then hits me in the flank with everything. So that unit's not going to have a very nice time. You can see I'm skipping some phases here because there's not a whole lot to take pictures of. But we're now, his movement phase, all he did was, I think, rally the warriors, and that's pretty much it. I think that's why I'm not really taking pictures. He does Rune of Resilience. Yeah, Rune of Resilience onto the Kingsguard to try to shut down some wounds, and I think that might be the last. Yeah, it's the last picture of the game. Where things had ended up, I mentioned briefly anyway. I turned to face with the Imperial Guard, but he doesn't take the bait, doesn't charge or anything. So, yeah, it ends up being just a brutal game. In terms of points, I still got quite a lot of points just tied up in the Imperial Guard. All my characters are alive, and that unit itself is almost 700 points. So it's like a 1,700 point unit. Riders are still alive. Got, I think, 2 units of Rangers still alive. The Spearmen do end up breaking and running from combat, so he picks up those points. And I've got some small points hanging around. But I realized, at first I thought that this was going to be like a major loss to me. But I realized that I had done quite a bit of damage around the board. That unit of Kingsguard on the right is decimated. Killed the other unit of Kingsguard. Got his Runic Smith, 2 of his Dragon Seekers, Seeker unit, and then beat up on that other unit of warriors. So anyway, in terms of points, it ends up being a 11-9 in my opponent's favor. But I'd mentioned all throughout the game that I completely forgot about objectives, so he ends up getting the objective, flipping it to a 14-6 victory to my opponent. So really a very enjoyable game. Had a lot of fun. I was hoping for like a 10-10. That was kind of, in my mind, the best outcome for this kind of a slog. But Chris, my opponent, was a fantastic guy, very enjoyable to play against, and I really enjoyed this game. So it's fun. Not the best result for game 1 of a tournament, but it's okay. At least it's not a 0, right? So anyway, we're now into game 2, which is against a Kingdom of Equitaine player. And let me pull up his list real quick. So here's my opponent's list for game 2. So my opponent is Tim. You can see the same weird thing is happening with new recruit where the total points don't add up correctly, but this is a legal list. It's just an adding issue within the list submission section. So he's got some characters, one flying on a hippogriff, and then a very diverse Kingdom of Equitaine list. He's got a couple units of Knights of the Realm, some archers, some levies, forges for scoring and running around, questing knights, some Ordo Wardens, one each of the War Machines, and then a Reliquary. So this will be fun. The deployment is counter thrust, so you can be, I think it's like 9 inches away from the center, but you still have to be 20 inches away from an enemy deployed unit. And then the secondary is spoils. So coming back to deployment here, this picture was actually taken at the end of my movement phase turn 1. So you can see everything had just kind of moved up from where they were, but if I sort of back up to where I had deployed things, it spoils. You can't really see them, but the objective markers are orange X's. Right, so you can see them kind of across the board, but orange on orange is difficult to spot. But now, having lost objective in round 1, I'm very determined to get objective in round 2. So anyway, deployment looks like this. I've got heavy infantry on the left. Basically what I did in terms of how this unit is, or how the army deployment's broken up, is the army's kind of broken up into thirds. So I have one small support unit, one parent unit, and then one unit of flagellants, essentially challenging each objective. Right, so if you imagine it that way, I've got support unit on the far left, unit of flagellants in the center, and then I've got a parent unit just to the right of the flagellants. Same thing in the center. I've got one support unit, my Imperial Guard, a unit of flagellants in the front. And then on the far right, on the right-hand side of the building there, same exact thing. I've got a parent unit, I've got a flagellants, and I've got a smaller scoring unit. Just all sort of support each other, give me some options. 2 scoring units to go after the objective, 1 unit of flagellants to probably die, but beat up on some stuff in the same area, right? The Electro Cavalry are just in front of those spearmen on the right of the building. The Riders, actually, because this was the end of my movement phase you're seeing this picture of, are way up in front of his Scorpion. Again, it's counter thrust for deployment, so they started up, farther up, and then they Vanguard 12, and then they marched up 16, or as far as they could anyway. So they're 1 inch in front of that Scorpion on turn 1. Again, shame I didn't bring pistols, because I could have just started firing at it, but they're just going to stand there. Anyway, so that's my thought going into this game, is let me just overwhelm each of these objectives, and at a minimum, even if I take a lot of damage, I should be winning objectives with this army. So that'll be a 3-point swing. So we'll see how it ends up going. Anyway, turn 1, everything moves up as far as it can. And this is just a shot of the left flank here and the right flank accordingly. Magic. I don't have a picture of what the dice were, but I get Unerring Strike on the unit of Knights in the center here. My characters are all just in the Imperial Guard again, but he's got his general in this unit here with a damsel, and I think his BSB's in here too. And then his deployment, I should have mentioned, I'm sorry, his hippos on the far left-hand side. One lance, I think it's the Questing Knights, just to the right of him. Scorpion on the hill, as I mentioned. His archers and levy with the reliquary are in the middle, like toward the woods there. He's got his trebuchet back behind the other knight boss. His other unit of knights are in a 5x2 formation just to the right of that, and then his Ordo Wardens over on the far right, trying to challenge that other objective marker. So anyway, I think I do like 1 wound over here with Unerring Strike, and that's pretty much it. Shooting, they plink a wound off of the Ordo Wardens. The Rangers finally doing something. And that's pretty much it, right? So no combat, not much shooting. So right into my opponent's turn 1. So he moves up with everything. And actually declares a charge against the flagellants. You can see I'd moved them up pretty far. So this is not a very difficult charge for him. But he figures he's got 2 characters in that unit. He's going to have to deal with them eventually, so he just charges in. He'd actually tried to charge, I think, with the other unit of knights, and they failed, so he was just trying to overwhelm. Or maybe he didn't. I don't know. This is one of the earlier games. But anyway, he charges in with the flagellants here. And he charges on the far left the hippo into the support unit to try to prevent them from countercharging into the flank of the other unit of questing knights charging into the other unit of flagellants. So his magic is a 5/4 phase. He ends up getting off. I don't even remember what path he had. It might have also been div. But I think he ends up getting +1 to hit. So instead of hitting on 3s with the knights, he's hitting on 2s. But that's pretty much it. Shooting the scorpion just knocks off a rider. The bowmen take out some of the halberdiers. And then, good God, the trebuchet, this list, my list against him is perfect for the trebuchet because there's just so many great targets. And it's strength 5, AP 1 all the time with a 4x4 template. So yeah, it's killing some stuff. I got lucky, I think, with this particular roll. It was a direct hit, and he just rolled low. But as soon as you said it's a 4x4, strength 5, AP 1, I started getting kind of nervous. Yeah, the hippogriff, we're into combat now, runs down the support unit on the far left. The flagellants take a lot of damage from the questing knights charging in. I think he threw an Orison over here. And yeah, but they take 5 wounds in response. So getting beat up on. And then the same thing happens here in the center. He had buffed his unit up, but it doesn't matter. This is the shame about flagellants, is that, a little shame for my opponent, is that it doesn't really matter how much damage you do to them. They're going to hit back and do a lot of damage to you. And especially with KOE, this is such a tough matchup for my opponent because of just the sheer number of bodies that you have to get to, because KOE relies so heavily on breaking things on the charge that he's just not able to do that here. And the flagellants in particular are just devastating. So he takes a ton of damage in response. He's just got his 3 characters sitting there now that the unit is wiped out. And yeah, now that this was, again, his turn 1, so now we're into my turn 2. So I charge in with the Electro Cav, figuring that I'm not going to win that combat, but I can at least tie him up, prevent him from charging me. And I think I tried to charge with those halberds. It was not a long charge because of the angles we were at. I tried to charge into the reliquary, but they failed their charge. And so like that, the spearmen on the left charge into the flank of the remaining questing knights. And into the magic phase, I get off both Scrying and Stars Align onto these flagellants that had reformed at the end of the last combat. So very scary combination for his, as I mentioned, 3 characters that are left in that unit. And shooting rangers, I think just do a wound to the trebuchet is what I'm trying to show you there. The rangers on the right are continuing to do wounds on the Ordo Wardens on the right for my opponent. And then in combat, I do, again, I'm just fighting characters at this point. I think I do 1 wound to the BSB, and then I kill the damsel. So pretty bad. Pretty bad for my opponent. I don't think he does any damage to me. Again, I've got Scrying up, and he's not charging. So he ends up losing combat, breaking and running, and I end up like this. So yeah, real horrible turn of events on turn 2, no less, for my opponent. Puts me in a very good spot. The Electro Cav, by comparison, do no damage and take a wound in response. So they lose combat, but they hold. And then the riders I mentioned had charged into the scorpion. So they destroy the scorpion and overrun. And then the spearmen over here, yeah, this is losing battle for these poor questing knights. So they do some damage to the flagellants, but they lose 3. They get run down. This was wild. I was grateful, actually, that the unit had 1 left, so I could do my normal trick of let's push everything to the left. However, when I pivoted the flagellants on the spot to overrun, I thought I was going to clip that hippogriff, which would have been, I mean, just icing, right? But you can see the angle here is such that, like, I don't think you could have fit a razor blade between those two units, right, with the flagellants overrunning, ignoring the movement tray for the purpose of the overrun, right? But I did it as carefully as I could and found that it was not, they did not connect with that hippogriff. Now, I think I played this wrong too. I think they should have stopped 1 inch away from the hippo, because breaking the 1 inch rule for charges, it only works if you're already engaged in combat. So I think that because they're now unengaged, overrunning it, they should have stopped 1 inch away. But the net result really doesn't change much in terms of the game, but that's where things sit. So, and then over here, we're now into my turn 3. Right? No, because that was my turn 2. So, I guess it would be for my... Yeah. Oh, no, this makes more sense. So we're now into my opponent's turn 2. So he charges me with his peasant levy with the reliquary into the flagellants there, because he's got to do something at this point, try to pick some points up. The Ordo Wardens move up just a little bit, and then he moves his hippogriff to challenge the Imperial Guard. That guy's got the lance, I think it's Uther's Metal, that does like a bolt thrower hit if he rolls a hit, so he can do some pretty nasty damage to those Imperial Guard if he charges in. In his magic phase, he doesn't have a magic phase now because his damsel's gone, so it's right into shooting. So the bowmen knock off some halberdiers, and that trebuchet, oh my god, it knocks out a bunch of spearmen. And then in the combat phase, it's another pillow fight. It's just a push. It's weird too because I'm wounding on 2, strength 5, I guess AP 2, so he's wound, 4 up, 6 up. So anyway, what do you do? They're just holding them up. But it's getting to the point where it's kind of annoying. Like, I want to charge in with other stuff, but can't. Yeah, this combat doesn't go great either, because, again, those flagellants were double buffs still. So they end up killing off the peasant levy with the reliquary and running the unit down, pursuing. So all that stuff in the back there is all dead, except for, my flagellants, the archers, and then the riders had run off the table and are coming back on. So now it's my turn, so we're into my turn. God, 3. Just a very bloody game. So I charge in with the flagellants. The rangers charge into the flank again, trying to push things to the left if I win combat and don't wipe them out. And you can see those little orange markers. I've been picking up the spoils here with my scoring units. Imperial Guard have one over here. And the spearmen picked up one on the left. So I've got all 3 of the markers for spoils of war. So I'm sitting in a very good spot in terms of objective, because my opponent's also running out of scoring units to take them back with. So at this point, I'm pretty confident I'm going to get objective, as long as I don't screw something up. But I turn to face with both the flagellants and the spearmen, try to create like a net, because, it's a solo flying model, so it's going to be very hard to pin down. But if I create enough lines of sight that I can charge it with something, then we should be good to go. I'm deliberately exposing my flank on the Imperial Guard because I figure I really can't dictate the fight, right? I'm hoping that I have enough units facing it that I will be able to charge it with something. But I figure he's going to charge in, do a ton of damage on the charge, so let him just have the flank. And then, because I'm going to be minimized discipline 10, because I'm bodyguard, I'll turn to face and then beat him up. But I don't want him to have all the charging bonuses against potentially my characters. So anyway, magic is a 7-5. I get off. Altered Sight was what I got on my Wizard King. So I end up throwing Altered Sight onto the unit of Electro Cav, try to do some damage, because again, I'm just trying to end that combat one way or the other. Frankly, I'd be fine if they lost and let the knights charge into my spearmen, but anyway, no shooting really to speak of. Into the combat phase, he does a couple of wounds to the rangers. He does a couple of wounds to the flagellants. Yeah, it looks like some, because I've got dice there to mark damage. But he takes a ton of damage in response and holds, though. And in this combat, yeah, even with altered setup, I can't get a single wound through with great weapons. And he's, strength 4, wounding on 3s. I've got a 3-up armor save. So he does more damage to me, but I hold. And now we're into his turn 3. So he charges flank with the Hippogriff into the Imperial Guard. And we're already into the shooting phase because there's no magic phase and there's really nothing else to move. Everything else is locked in combat except for these archers. So the archers fire into the halberdiers there. And the trebuchet hits that support. Again, he's trying to force a panic check, have them drop the marker because they're way outside of the general's range at this point. But they pass, despite taking 10 casualties from that trebuchet. And then in combat, it goes as expected. So the Imperial Guard take a ton of damage, but they hold, and they do 1 wound to the hippo, or maybe that had been done at some point, and they turn to face. And then, this combat up here is still ongoing, just kind of slap fight. Does no damage to me this time. I do 1 wound to him. But in the other combat with the Ordo Wardens, they lose combat, and I turn to face like this. In fact, I think they're killed to a man, which is why I don't have to pursue with anything. So the flagellants reform and turn to face. Or pivot and turn to face. Anyway, they charge into the flank there. This is now into my turn 4. Halberdiers charge into the archers. The riders came back onto the board. The flagellants up there turn to face the trebuchet. And then down here, the spears move in to potentially rear charge into that hippo. Magic is a 5/4. And in the magic phase, Altered Sight is gone. Something blows up the trebuchet. I can't remember if I magic it off or if I shoot it off somehow, but I want to say that I magicked it off, and I don't have a picture of the spell card because Altered Sight is gone now. You can see here in the combat phase it's gone. So I think I just, again, took the picture kind of in the wrong order, but I think I get Unerring Strike off on the trebuchet and blow it up. So that's what I'm taking a picture of there. Anyway, so that's the magic phase, and really no shooting to speak of. In the combat phase, I do a bunch of wounds, 3 wounds anyway, to the knights. He does 1 wound back to me. And then, the hippo does a bunch more damage to the Imperial Guard. However, we kill it. He had gotten Stars Align off in the magic phase, in addition to Unerring Strike. So I think now we're moving even quicker because there's very little left on the board. I think we're into my opponent's turn. So that was at the end of my turn 4 combat phase. So this would be his turn 4. And really all he's got left on the board now is the archers and this unit of knights. So we're going straight to hit, and the archers are engaged in combat. Straight into... Well, hell, now I don't even know what I'm taking pictures of. Yeah, that was his whole turn. Yeah. So you can see I don't want to get into the details of it. There's very little left on the board at this point, and that's we're now into the final game. So this is the final picture of the game. This combat somehow dragged on for like another 2 turns. Is the kind of Spark Notes version of what happened. You can see the flagellants are moving down, but the long and short of it is I end up killing this unit and killing the archers, so there's nothing left on the table for my opponent at the end of the game. I got objectives, and it is a 20-0 victory to me. So that's good in terms of overall tournament results. I did really feel bad, though, for my opponent. He is a wonderful guy again, Tim, and I was trying to put myself in his perspective, like, what would I have done with his list against my list, and I genuinely don't think there's much of anything you could do. It's just such a tough matchup, right? That there's like little things here and there in terms of micro decisions in the game to try to like mitigate damage, but this is such an uphill fight for KOE. I really felt for my opponent coming into this game, and then the results kind of echoed that. So again, very enjoyable game, wonderful guy. Great result for me in terms of tournament, and potential round 3 placement, but that's where things sit. So into the third game then. So we're into game 3 now, and I'm against Jeff Durham, who is an excellent guy. Now, I've been saying that about all my opponents. Truly, I'm really grateful at the end of the weekend. I didn't have a single game where I was kind of grumpy about my opponent. Just wonderful people, everybody at the event, but all my opponents were fantastic, really enjoyable games. Jeff Durham, for those who don't know, is a prolific gamer. He runs Hogsfest down in Kansas that I need to make a pilgrimage to at some point. I hear it's an excellent time, and he's an ETC player who's been on Team New Zealand, I think, for the last 2 or 3 years is what he had said. So very experienced. And this list, even looking at it before the game, I knew this was going to be an uphill battle for me, because I don't have any way to deal with some of this stuff outside of combat. And this list is just very difficult to strip points off of, because a lot of the points are tied up in some of these blocks, as you'll see throughout the game. So there's no easy, cheap stuff to go after, really, outside of, his chaff. So this is the list, and then I'll kind of explain where characters go as part of the deployment phase. So a couple things to mention here. So this is the same table I played on in the last game. I'm just on the other side. And deployment is, I think it's Dawn Assault, where you have a section cut off of one side. So I have 18 inches cut off of my right side of my board, where those 2 units of Rangers are deployed, and then his are on the left. So that's a unit of zombies to raise over where the papers are. There's nothing deployed over there. The secondary is the custom scenario, the Duel of Titans scenario, which is each side gets an unbreakable 10 wound monster. It's res 5. It moves like a unit. It doesn't move like a solo model. It has to wheel and whatnot. It does 2d3 grind attacks at strength 5 AP 0 or strength 4 AP 2. You have to choose at the beginning of the roll. But the way you win the secondary is by having the Titan engage in combat, because if it kills a unit or wins a combat, it gains a token, and then whoever Titan gains the most tokens by the end of the game wins the objective. The caveat to that, against 10 wounds, arm 4, unbreakable in terms of defensive stats, is that if it dies, it loses all of its counters. So the 2 ways to win this objective are you have to have your Titan win at least 1 combat in order to get a token, because the wording is that you have to have more tokens than your opponent. So if you have none, it doesn't matter. But that you can either get more tokens, or you can kill your opponent's Titan and remove all of their tokens. So those are the 2 thoughts going into this game in terms of securing objective. But otherwise, scoring units don't really matter here. So in terms of deployment, again, my right flank is totally cut off. So I've got the Rangers over there in the scouting phase get dropped. Otherwise, I have to double stack my line, because I'm also penned in by ruins on the left. And I want to just run at his line with my flagellants, which is what you see there. So 3 units of flagellants in the front. My Titan is my Teclis 2000 elephant model on a 50-75 millimeter base there in the center. Support unit on the right, and then the back line is Electro Cav, my 2 parent units flanking the Imperial Guard, and a support unit in the center there. And then the Riders have moved up. Again, this is the 3rd game in a row where I wish they had pistols to kind of plink shots at the Vampire Knights. They're hiding behind the house on the other side of the table. In terms of my opponent's deployment, speaking of Vampire Knights and their placement, he's got a big block of ghouls in the center there. Behind that is a zombie bunker with a necromancer. He's got a dart of wolves there. His barrow guard with a vampire courtier in the front there. And then Spectral Hunters behind them, another unit of wolves, and then I guess it's next to a tree. He's got some bats next to the wolves. His Titan is that Morghast model, kind of hiding in the woods there, also on a 50-75 millimeter base. But then that Barrow Knight unit is the scary thing that's got both his BSB and his Vampire Lord General with True Thirst. So if he does damage, it's raising the Knight's back. So very scary combo. Again, going into this game, I know it's going to be really difficult to like just plink points off of this list. You really have to focus energy into tackling these units and removing them from the board. So anyway, my opponent had dropped for first. I had counter deployed the way that I described. So we're into his turn 1. So he moves up with everything. He's trying to run up the flank on the Barrow Guard or the Barrow Knights. And then the Vampire Knights, you can see up on the top left there, have crept around to the hill. His magic phase is 8-5, and he raises up a unit of zombies here, which I let go through. And then he throws Savage Fury onto the Rangers over here, which gives them Frenzy Battle. He's trying to Frenzy bait, so he throws Frenzy on the unit. And forgive me, I don't know why, but for a couple of pictures here toward the middle, the live feature turned on my phone. So some of these pictures like move a little bit at the beginning, but so yeah, there's no shooting, of course, for him. So we're into my turn 1. So I charge with the Flagellants just to get rid of the zombies there. And then I'm forced to charge the Titan with the Rangers because they're on a maximized dis-7. So they run over there. And then I move up. So the Rangers are just off the hill there on the left-hand side. I don't know what I'm going to do with these Vampire Knights yet. I just know that I don't want them charging anything important in the center. I'm just trying to kind of fence them off for a minute while I kind of decide what to do in the middle. Because I know that I'm going to have to combine charges to tackle some of these units. And I don't want to have to worry about Vampire Knights in the flank for the first couple of turns. So the Riders, the support unit, and the Electro Cav are all going to be dedicated, along with the Rangers on the left, to dealing with this unit, just kind of keeping them at bay. In the magic phase, I bubble Scrying and throw Guiding Light over on the far right-hand side. And yeah, didn't take a picture of it, but I guess I did take a picture of it. The Flagellants kill off the injured zombies and then just stay where they're at. I don't need them overrunning into the middle of the board. In his turn, he moves the Vampire Knights up onto the hill, as you see them. He had declared some charges on the right. Again, apologies, out of order, but he charged the Barrow Knights, into the Rangers. But the way that they wheeled, they were forced to clip like that. And then his Titan charges into the Rangers to pick up some easy points and critically an easy token for the scenario. And then in the middle, the Dart of Wolves runs up the chaff, as you see them. Magic is a 8-6 phase. And then he gets Whispers of the Veil, so -1 res off onto these Flagellants. And he gets off Hand of Glory, so an Aegis onto the Titan. And then end of the combat phase, unsurprisingly, the Barrow Knights kill off that Ranger, and then the Titan kills off the other unit of Rangers. Actually, I think they run. There might be one model left, but he does not pursue. He turns to face, gets a token. And then we're now into my turn 2. So I declare some charges. The obvious ones were the Titan and the Flagellants into those Wolves to pick up a token for the Titan and kill off the chaff. The Flagellants, they're at -1 res right now, so he's going to have an easier time wounding me. But I don't really care. Again, I'm going into this kind of the same thought process I had with the first game, which is that I'm going to lose the Flagellants. But the question is, what kind of damage can I do with them before they go down in order to make it easier for my parent units to come in and potentially finish the job? So that was the thought. Halberdiers charge into the Titan there. I can't remember what I was thinking with this, because in retrospect, I don't think this was the right thing to do. I figured he's not going to be able to kill them all. I can tie him up for a couple of turns, because really the Titan on its own doesn't actually do that much damage. It's just doing 2d3 grinds and 1 stomp. So it's going to take him a couple of turns to chew through that unit. So maybe that's what I was thinking at the time. And then otherwise, I move up like this. So the Rangers move in to chaff the Vampires for at least one more turn. The Riders are moving around the flank. Thinking again, I'm going to ultimately have to engage these guys, trying to just perform a delaying action with these 4 units on the left. And I'm thinking that if I charge flank with the Riders while I clip with the heavy infantry, charge in with the Electro Cav, if I can do a combo charge here, I might actually win a combat despite probably taking 8 wounds in response because they're still hitting on 3s, winning on 2s, even when charged. But that's the hope, is that I can win like the first round of combat, and then anyway, we'll see what happens. But that's what I'm trying to do. And don't know what I'm taking a picture of there. Yeah, I guess nothing happens in the magic phase, or maybe I'm trying to take a picture of something having happened in the magic phase. I don't actually know. But combat, this was an easy one. So the Titan gets a token. We kill off the dire wolves, and the flagellants overrun accordingly. And this one went really bad. Again, he stopped my magical buffs from getting off. And yeah, -1 to res on flagellants meant that they took a ton of damage in response. They plinked a wound onto the vampire, though. So anyway, that's where things sit. And then this combat here, yeah, the halberdiers do a wound onto the Titan. They take 5 wounds in response, and they hold. Now we're into his turn 3. So he charges the flank with the Baronites. He moves up the wolves to chaff the Imperial Guard. And then on the left, he does charge the Vampire Knights into the Rangers. Magic then ends up being a 9-6. And he gets off Whispers again, but this time onto the Flagellants that are facing off against the Ghouls. So we saw what happened in the last round when that happened. And then Hand of Glory for a Aegis save onto his Baronites. And then the Halberdiers, this sucks. The Halberdiers break from combat, but there's still 3 left. And then they end up chaffing my unit of Spears. So not that the Spears charging in is going to be like, wow, what a game-winning move for me. But it's certainly better than being charged by those vampire, or that, unit of knights there. So anyway, oh well. Yeah, we're now into my turn 3. So I do end up charging the Imperial Guard into the wolves there. And this is after my moves. The Flagellants charge into the Ghouls. Again, I know that I'm going to be +1 to wound, essentially, -1 res. But I'm just trying to do damage to those Ghouls. I'm hoping if I can get like a magical buff up, I'm going to blend them pretty well. The Halberdiers don't rally, so after the charges are done, they end up running through the Spears. And now we're over on the left-hand side. So he had eaten the Rangers over on the left, and I charged in with the Electro Cav, and I attempted to charge in with the heavy infantry there too, but they failed their charge. So, oh well, Electro Cav are on their own. Magic is a big phase for me. It's a 10-7. And I'm able to get off scrying onto the Imperial Guard block, because again, I'm teeing up the next round of combat. And yeah, this is where jump all the way to the combat phase here. So they blow up that unit of wolves, and then yeah, we actually do really good damage to each other. So that's where things sit at the end of the Ghoul combat with the Flagellants there. And then the Electro Cav, they end up doing, I think, 1 wound, but I can't remember if they failed their fear test or what, but they do 1 wound to the Vampire Knights, and they die to a man in response, so just get deleted. And that's where they sit. So he ends up charging the support unit of heavy infantry there, who flee like that. And then he charges, this is now we're going to his turn 4. He charges the bats into the flank of the Spears to debuff them. He charges the Titan and the Baronites into the Spears as well. And yeah, this is where things sit. So the Vampire Knights just move down the hill as part of their failed charge. Magic is a 7-6. And he ends up getting off, not Whispers. I know the card is there. He gets this unit of zombies in play. This was, again, this was bad play on my part. Because if I go back, you can see That is a flank charge for that unit of flagellants. It's a long charge for them. I think they probably would have needed like a 9. But that's a flank charge onto that unit of Barrow Guard. And I predict that the flagellants that are in combat with the ghouls aren't going to be there anymore anyway, or maybe it'll be like one guy, but they won't be blocking that charge arc anymore. So my opponent spotted this, and I ran out of dice, so used his balance spell at the end of his phase to pop that unit of zombies there to slow him down for a turn. So, oh well. The ghouls at the end of the combat end up eating the flagellants and then reforming like that. And then this combat, the spears just take a ton of damage is what ends up happening. And everybody's sitting happy. In my turn, some charges were declared. I think the spears attempted to charge the vampire knights again just to try to tie them up. Now I'm trying to engage more resources to tie up these vampires, but they fail their charge. The support unit rallies. The Imperial Guard charge into the flank of those bats, and the flagellants and Titan both charge into the zombies that got raised in the prior magic phase. So yeah, combat over here is just one big mess. Magic is a 6-5 to me. And I get off Stars Align onto that unit of flagellants that was engaged with the zombies that were now in the end of the combat phase. The Titan, you can see, gain another token, so I'm up to 2. He overruns, but only overruns like a couple of inches, something like that. So they are just sitting in front of that unit of Barrow Guard. And then, again, I don't know what I'm taking a picture of here. Oh, I had charged with the Riders, because I was hoping to charge the Riders in to support the Spearmen. I think I went way too far back, but maybe I don't have a picture of it. The Riders and the Spearmen both charged, but the Spearmen failed. That's, you can't see it up there, but the Riders charged the flank. So I was just trying to bring static combat res in. Anyway, so what I'm taking a picture of there is that the Riders are now gone because they charged in on their own and just got destroyed. So waste of points there. This was unfortunate too. This is a longer charge for my opponent, but you can see he can barely wheel past that unit of spears, again, due to their failed charge. So he is able to charge the rear on the flagellants with the vampire knights and charge the zombies into the flank, which was done simply so that I could not reform. So he's now going to start wailing on flagellants in the flank, and you can see that the angles are such that the vampires are not in the charge arc of the spearmen. So I'm going to have to now waste another turn to turn to face and then charge in the subsequent turn. So really bad series of events there. He charged the Titan with the ghouls in the flank and the Barrow Guard in the front. It's just going to try to kill the thing. And the combat on the right that was happening, the spears break and run, get run down by the Barrow Guard. The Titan is now unengaged, and the Imperial Guard are just engaged with the bats. That's kind of how things play out. So everything's sitting like that. So I think he's just showing his reforms, right? So reforming like that. This combat, they beat up on each other. And then the Titan takes some damage. And the bats are down. I think he counts down. So I think there's 3 wounds left on that one remaining unit of bats. So it's just a big cluster in the middle. So we're now into my turn. What is this, turn 4? So I turn to face with my spears to potentially charge into the back of those vampires. And otherwise, there's not much movement. You can see the support unit down at the bottom has moved into support. The other support unit in the woods is moving up to potentially flank charge something. But otherwise, everything's so clustered together, there's just not much movement even to be had. Magic is a 7-5. And I get off scrying onto the flagellants, which is great. It's a shame I can't turn to face. So I'm just swinging with my back rank against the vampire knights. But otherwise, they're just sitting there, but at least I'll be -1 to hit. And then I throw Guiding Light onto that unit just in case something happens. And yeah, look at this, guys. So no shooting really to speak of. the Flagellants, even having one rank of guys in the back attacking, even without Stars Align up, did like 6 or 7 wounds to the vampire. Maybe they already had 1 wound, so maybe it was like 5, so a little less crazy. Yeah, so we did a ton of damage to the Vampire Knights with the Flagellants and the combat sets like that. The poor Titan here, yeah, he's grinding away at the ghouls because he's strength 5 AP 0, which is a better proposition than strength 4 AP 2 against the Barrow Guard. However, he's just hemorrhaging wounds. There's so many attacks coming in. He's up to 6 out of his 10, but he's unbreakable, so he holds. And yeah, this is interesting. So the bottom right there, you can see the bats died and my unit pivots. So again, this was on my turn. I had turned to face with the spear at the beginning of this turn. Got the 1 magical buff off. There's not a whole lot of mine left on the table at this point. You can see there's 1 other support unit kind of creeping up on the left side there. However, I turned to face at the end of that combat with the bats, the Barrow Guard. Now, I think ultimately those 2 units, if he charged in with the Knights, would just demolish each other, right? But my opponent, being a very experienced ETC player, knows that it's not a good trade for him. So he's would rather play safe and clean up points elsewhere. The problem is that he can't get those Knights out of the way. So he either has to charge me or tie me up with something else, right? And so the only thing available you can see is his Titan over on the right-hand side, which is a risk for him because while it only has 1 wound on it out of 10, those Imperial Guard are going to have, 2 combats to beat on it. So it's a catch-22 for him. Either he has to risk his Death Star Night Bus in combat with the Imperial Guard, or he has to tie it up with the 1 unit that is used to gain the objective. So that's what he ends up doing. So this now is into his turn 5. So he charges in with the Spectral Hunters that have been kind of waiting up on the right-hand side into the Flagellants to try to swing that combat because those poor Vampire Knights haven't been able to do enough damage to him. And then, yeah, he ends up charging the Titan into the flank. I personally still think this is the right call instead of charging his Knights into the front. And again, they have fight and extra rank up, so it'd be a tough nut to crack. And ends up marching. Maybe actually this is his turn 6, because then I will have a turn after this. Yeah, I think this is his turn 6, to where he then marches his vampires out because he's not worried about anything anymore. Just in case something horrible happens with this Titan, and then I'm able to charge the Knights. Yeah, he runs them out of the way. And in the magic phase, he gets off Perception of Strength to debuff my Flagellants. So they're at -1 strength now. And then he gets off Breath of Corruption onto the Titan. Try to do damage to the Imperial Guard. And then no shooting, so into the combat phase, the Flagellants even debuffed, do 2 wounds to the Spectral Hunters, 1 wound to the Spectral Hunter, and then a wound to the zombies, and I don't think anything to the vampires. But they hold. You can see they're still holding on. They still got scrying up, so he's -1 to hit me. So unfortunately, this picture is showing that the Titan was felled by the Whites and the Ghouls. So I'm now down on objective unless I can kill his Titan, in which case I will push on objective. So that'll be what we try to do over on the right-hand side. This is now end of combat of his turn. Yeah, this must be his turn 6. Because I've done 3 wounds to him, so he's now up to 4 out of 10 wounds. He's done a couple to me, and I've turned to face him. So that's where things sit. And then, yeah, now this is my turn 6. So I charge rear with the spears, just trying to bring in some static combat res. That's rear, big rear, 3 ranks, banner, charge. So bringing in a lot of static combat res. And we can see if that will swing things in my favor. And don't know what I'm taking a picture of there, just showing you where things sat at the end of the movement phase. I've got the 2 units of support infantry. They're just hanging out. There's really nothing for them to do except, not die and hold on to 300 points or whatever. And then magic is an 8 to 6 phase, and I get off scrying onto this, well, I can't remember if no, I was trying to get it onto the flagellants. But anyway, I guess I skip a couple of phases there and some pictures. So this is the end of the game. This is turn 6. The spearmen break from combat and run. The flagellants, though, you can see have still a decent number of guys left. And the Imperial Guard do kill off his Titan. So it's a push on objective. However, I've taken a ton of damage, especially with the spears breaking at the end there. And all of his characters are still alive. My Imperial Guard are all still alive. The characters are alive, but it ends up being a 14-6 victory to my opponent, just on points. So very well played to my opponent. This was a tough match for me going into it, just because, again, I had to duke it out with all of these combat blocks. But in the end, another very enjoyable game for me. And the end of day 1 of this event. I think unusually for me, I'm going to break this up over 2 videos, simply because this is otherwise going to be like a 2.5 hour long video, something like that. So I'll bookmark like normal where the battles start and end, but 20.66, so 32 point end of the first day, so just above a 10 point average per game, which I'll take. I'm always aiming for just a 10 point average over the course of an event. So still have a whole day 2 more games to play to see if I can improve things from here. But very enjoyable first day. And I'll look forward to telling you about day 2 in the next video. So thanks for watching and happy gaming.